Hey, it's Nate from Navigator Bookkeeping, and it is finally here. The second round of PPP has arrived with the new stimulus bill being passed in Congress. Now, as of this day, December 22, it hasn't been signed by the president yet, but it sounds like it should be signed, so we can look forward to it being official. But anyways, I wanted to give you the 5 takeaways from that stimulus bill that you need to know as a business owner. There's a lot in there. There's a lot of really beneficial things to business owners. So let's get right into them. The 5 takeaways that are going to be most helpful to you. Number 1, this is probably the biggest one in there. In the past, the PPP was not going to be able to be deducted from your business taxes if it was forgiven. So say you got $100,000 in your PPP, you spent it all on payroll, you did everything right, you got it forgiven. That $100,000 would not be it would not be deducted from your taxes. Well, that changes now. All those business expenses can be deducted. So that's going to be a big change, and a big change from what the IRS had said. So Congress has changed that. If your PPP gets forgiven, everything that you spent will be deducted from your taxes, just like normal. Obviously, there's not going to be different deductions, it's just normal deductions from every other year, but that is going to be a big change, and it's going to affect tax bills positively for a lot of business owners. So that's pretty excellent. Number 2, the EIDL grant, which many of you got. This was right at the beginning of the pandemic. They basically said, we have this money for you. We're going to give you $1,000 per employee, up to $10,000. A lot of businesses received the EIDL grant. Well, in the past, what had been said is that EIDL was going to actually take away from your forgiveness for the PPP. So going back to our last example, if you got $100,000 for your PPP and you got $10,000 from the EIDL, you could only get $90,000 of that PPP forgiven because it was kind of double dipping, right? You couldn't get both the EIDL and the PPP forgiven. So there was really no way around that. Well, that has now been changed where the EIDL is not going to mess with PPP forgiveness. It's just a grant on its own. So if you received a $10,000 EIDL grant, you don't have to pay that back anymore. So that's a really big change because there's a lot of business owners looking at their financial statements right now, seeing that EIDL on there, thinking they're going to have to pay it back. Well, it's not going to affect PPP forgiveness now, so you're actually not going to have to pay that back if you get the PPP forgiven. So 2 first changes there are really huge and are going to be big changes. It's going to be thousands of dollars that your business gets to keep and use as you kind of continue through the rest of the pandemic here. Third one is also big news. This is just a lot happening in this stimulus bill, obviously. The third one is that there's a second round of PPP loans. So obviously we've been talking about the PPP. It's helped a lot of businesses through this, but there's been a lot of controversy with it as well because a lot of larger corporations got it, a lot of businesses got it that didn't need it. So they're doing it differently this time. They're being a lot more strict in the way that they're allowing PPPs to be given to businesses. So what's happening in this second round is there's some added stipulations. So first of all, there's a lot of money in there, over $300 billion that's going to be able to be used for businesses, but they're really trying to target kind of the mom and pop smaller businesses in this one. So these are kind of the stipulations. So I know I told you there's 5 takeaways, but I have some sub points under this third one. So bear with me. These are important. So to get the second round of the PPP, first of all, you can't have 300 employees or more. You have to be under that threshold. So most small businesses should be fine there, have to have less than 300 employees. So that should be doable. Second piece is you have to have used all of your PPP from the first time. So if you got the PPP back in summer or spring, you have to have used that full amount or planning on using it, going to use it, finish it up to get the second round. This is the big one, number 3. Your gross receipts, so basically your revenue, has to be less than in 2019. Now, here's how you determine that. What they want you to do is they want you to compare quarters. So it can be quarter 1 to quarter 1, quarter 2 to quarter 2, whatever, with all 4 quarters, but you have to compare the same quarter. So you can't compare quarter 4 of 2020 with quarter 1 of 2019. You always have to compare the same quarter from year over year. But anyways, to get to what you need to compare is your gross receipts, so your revenue has to be at least 75% of the previous year or even less. That means 25% less than the previous year. So if you're looking at your financial statements right now and you see, okay, quarter 3, we actually did better than 2019, or even if you did the same, that's not going to work. So you have to find 2 quarters to match up where 2020 was 25% less than the previous year. If you can't find that, if you've improved or stayed the same or haven't decreased by that much in all of your quarters in 2020, you're not going to be able to get the second round of the PPP. So that's going to rule a lot of businesses out. This is only for businesses that really need it. That's what they're trying to hit on here, as you can tell. The portion along with that is there's what's called a necessity test. And basically, this just means you need to ask yourself, does my business actually need this loan to stay in business or to pay my expenses? And the SBA has said they're not going to check this on loans under $2 million, but that doesn't mean not to worry about this, because the IRS could check this, the Department of Justice could check this. A lot of other governmental agencies have the ability to check in on this and penalize companies that do not actually need the loan and are still taking it. And along with that, we're kind of in an environment right now where there's a lot of blowback on companies that are taking loans, PPP loans, that don't need it. So all this information is going to be public. It's going to be shown. Everyone's going to be able to see it. So if your company takes a loan and doesn't need it, there could be a lot of negative publicity and blowback for you on that. So really important to look into the necessity test. Does my company actually need this, or am I trying to just kind of get a shortcut here? If you don't need it, don't take it, because there could be a lot of consequences and stipulations if you take this PPP loan and don't actually need it for your business. So that's something to really consider when you're going through this process. There's a couple other stipulations as well with the PPP. If you're majority owned by Chinese companies or by a Chinese company, you can't take the PPP. And there's a couple other pieces in there as well. So if you have questions, feel free to send those over and I can give you more specific answers, but I don't want to go through every single one of those. Just giving a couple more pieces of information for the PPP. Once again, it's going to be 2.5 times your monthly payroll, just like the first round. There's a much simpler application if you got a PPP the first time. So it's a much simpler application both for getting the loan and for forgiveness on it. And then one other nice piece is actually the covered period, which is the time when you can use the loan. You might remember in the first round, they initially said 8 weeks and they changed it to 24 weeks. You can now actually choose what you'd like your covered period to be, anywhere between 8 and 24 weeks. And there's actually some wider expenses that can also be used on the PPP. You might remember you could only do payroll and utilities and very specific expenses in the first round. They've added in a couple things for the second round. For example, paying your suppliers is in there, which is a big change. And some other pieces, like if there's some physical damages to your building, you can also include those. But anyways, that's getting a little bit more into the weeds. We want to stay more general here. So anyways, that third point, I know there's a lot in there, but basically the second round of the PPP is here. You can apply for it, but please make sure that it is necessary for your business. And you, of course, have to hit a couple of those stipulations, mainly that your revenues are 25% less or more from 2019, comparing quarter to quarter. So that's the third one. The fourth one is stimulus checks. If you have seen this, is probably the one that's been in the news the most. There's a second round of stimulus checks coming. It's $600 per taxpayer, also $600 per eligible child, which means they're under 18, they're not an adult. So the income levels are the same for this one. So if you got stimulus checks the first round, you're going to get them again this time, and it should be a lot faster. They're just doing a lot of direct deposits. So those may even be coming out next week, according to the Treasury Secretary. So stimulus checks, that's our fourth takeaway. That's going to be big. And along with that, unemployment benefits are coming back as well. You might remember they did a flat rate of $600 last time. This time it's a flat rate of $300 per week, and they're going to do that for about up to 24 weeks. The last one is not as important, but a big one nonetheless for owners. They're changing the deduction level for meals and entertainment. You might remember that got switched to 50% a couple years ago. They're now switching it to 100%. So as long as the business meal or entertainment is from a restaurant, provided from a restaurant in 2021 or 2022, so you get 2 full years to use this, you can write off 100% of that meal. So that's a big change from the 50%. Going to lead to a lot more deductions. Obviously, from my viewpoint as a bookkeeper, please make sure they're still business meals and they're legitimate. Don't go off with your family and spend hundreds of dollars and try to write it off. That's not cool. You can get into a lot of legal implications if you start doing that, especially if it's a consistent thing. So that is a great write-off if you're using that legitimately. It could help your business write off a lot in taxes. So those are our 5 takeaways from this new stimulus bill. There's a lot there. If you have more questions, definitely reach out. We'd love to help you. We've found some great resources we can send over as well. But there's a lot of really great things in here for business owners. So we will talk soon on that.